Welcome to Married to History, where we try to be informative, entertaining, and family-friendly.
Aloha, I'm Christopher. I have a fancy piece of paper on my wall that says that I know more about history than most people do.
I'm Shirley. I'm a homeschool mom that relies on good curriculum, Christopher, and Hamilton the musical to teach our kids history.
Too much Hamilton. Way too much Hamilton.
Hey, honey, I have a history question for you.
If it has Hamilton's name in it, I'm gonna blow a gasket.
It never has to do with that.
Then I love history questions.
It has never lined up like that. All right, I want to know why that one guy was so venerated. You know, the British dude, leader of the thing.
Could you be
slightly
more specific?
You know who I'm talking about.
No.
The British dude. He was leader during that one time.
Britain has produced a lot of men that were dudes and were leaders at one time or another. They even produced a woman who was dude-ish and a leader for a time.
I want to hear your first guess, though.
Okay, well, my first guess, I would guess, would be Churchill.
You're right! I don't know why that amuses me so much, but I knew that you would get it right.
Okay.
Okay, I bring this up because this is based on a real thing from like several months ago, like before we started the podcast. So the questions I ask you...
How long have we been doing this?
50 episodes.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, continue.
Okay, so the questions I ask, they're usually like crafted. Like I'm not usually as stupid as I sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I'll ask something and you don't know if I'm being stupid or purposely obtuse. And just the look on your face is just golden. And because you're like a computer glitching out because I could tell like you're not sure how to react. Should you laugh? Should you not because you don't want to insult me?
So what you're telling me is that I look like Sheldon when somebody like gets him in a bit of a conundrum and he does that little twitch with his eye or something like that?
Yes, that's it. Okay, so several months ago, this came up. I saw a picture of Churchill. I can't remember why, but there was a picture of Churchill. And his name was on the tip of my tongue, and I could not think of who he was. So I said, the British dude, the leader of the thing. And you guessed it correct.
No, did I?
You did.
I have no memory of this.
That's how I knew you would guess correct again. So I just thought that was beautiful.
To be honest, I think my first impression was to say William Wallace, but he wasn't a British dude.
I absolutely would not have said William Wallace.
I don't know why he was my first thought.
How many times have you brought up Braveheart on here? And I'm always like, really? Again?
It's a good historical movie.
Anyways, so I don't remember who laughed harder at me, you or the kids, but it was a beautiful moment. So I want to know.
The kids were there for this moment?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I want to know why that British dude, the leader of the thing, why he was so cool.
Well, if you were to ask him, because he's the man that beat Hitler.
But he didn't literally beat Hitler. He was the leader. Hitler was the leader. Their armies. Like, he wasn't on the battlefield.
You know that. I know that.
They take
but
too much credit.
I'm not convinced he didn't know that.
They all take too much credit. He was not on the battlefield.
That is true. He was not on the battlefield.
Okay, go ahead. Educate me. Why would he say that he beat Hitler?
Because he was the leader of Britain at the time that Hitler was beaten. He was the for pretty much the whole of World War II. He was the British Prime Minister. Oddly enough, so his entire reign as Prime Minister was consumed by the war. So oddly enough, the day that he took office was the day that the Germans invaded France.
Dude.
And I don't remember exactly what day he was elected out, but at the end of the war, I don't even think Japan had been defeated yet at that point, but I think Germany had been defeated by that point, and he lost his bid for re-election. He was a very popular prime minister, and he lost his bid for re-election.
Okay, so that
at the tail end of the war.
So he was like a hero, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But he lost?
He lost his re-election bid, yeah.
That's like George Washington losing re-election. That's insane.
Well, and here's the problem. So this is one of the problems with, again, how history is taught and how in-depth people go about history. So most Americans think that Washington was God. He could do no wrong. Because there's that story about how, they offered to make him king once.
Right.
But So despite the fact that Washington was beloved, after the war was over and in the early days of the Constitution and during
Uh-huh.
the both terms of his presidency, there were a lot of people that did not like him. There were a lot of newspapers that
Hmm.
eviscerated him and had all sorts of bad, horrible things to say. I don't know if I've
Interesting.
said this before on the show or not, but it's entirely possible that had he chosen to run for a third term,
Mm-hmm.
he might have lost.
Okay, that sounds
And
like
so Churchill is probably the
okay.
same thing. I mean, as the war is obviously going towards its end,
Uh-huh.
so I could be wrong on this, but I think most people, or at least a lot of knowledgeable people that I've read about and that I've seen their writings and that I've even talked to on a couple of occasions, have
Uh-huh.
kind of agreed that by the end of 43, it was obvious that okay, they're going to lose. It was just a question of how long is it going to take us to finish the job, kind of a
Right.
scenario. So it's entirely possible that that mentality did make British people think that, okay, well, Churchill isn't the guy we need anymore. So I'm not terribly familiar with the circumstances of how Churchill became PM in the
Mm-hmm.
first place. But if I remember correctly, he was not people's first choice. I want to say that he was
Really?
relatively, he wasn't a nobody, but he was relatively close enough to the back of the scene, the back of the line, as
Uh-huh.
far as his popularity or whatnot. And if I remember correctly, the reason why he got the prime ministership, I think, was because he was seen as the least objectionable character at a
Uh
time of high objections.
Lesser of two evils situation.
Kind of like that, yeah. So I'd say very much like the new Speaker of the House that we just got. Give people an idea of when this episode was recorded.
November
So
2023.
I forget his name already. I want to say our new speaker's name is Johnson.
I have
I,
no
yeah,
idea.
I might be remembering that wrong. But anyway, my understanding is that the reason he got the job
Mm-hmm.
wasn't because, oh, everybody loved him, but was more because, all right, he's a relative newcomer, small timer.
Mm.
Not enough people know that they don't like him. So he's the least objectionable of, or rather, he has the least objections. It's not that he has
Yeah.
the love, he just has the least
Yeah.
objections. And
That's
I
great.
remember at least at some point in time in my readings that that was one of the reasons why Churchill got the job in the first place, was that he was just seen as the less objectionable.
Interesting. But he went on to be like a hero. Like, isn't he still looked at
Yeah.
fondly?
I believe he's still looked at fondly. Yeah, I believe there's still plenty of people that revere him. I don't know about statues and buildings named after him or anything to that nature,
Yeah.
but yeah, to the best of my knowledge, he's still a beloved
Huh.
character in British history. And he, despite the fact that he does lose his bid for prime
Uh-huh.
ministership at the end of the war. Now, to be fair, because I'm not overly familiar with British politics,
Uh-huh.
it might not be that he didn't win.
His party.
It's that his party could have been
Yeah.
outvoted, and thus he would have lost his prime ministership. But he
Right.
does manage to get it back through some supposed chicanery and browbeating per se. He does manage to get
Hmm.
prime ministership back for another term,
Yeah.
but I don't remember how long that one lasts. It doesn't last terribly long, and he's not overly popular during that last term.
Huh. I'm just reminded of a picture that I'm going to put on our social media. So, again, people need to go to our social media, our TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. There's this great picture where they splice together Churchill like doing the peace sign and
Mm-hmm.
Hitler doing the Nazi salute, and it says scissors beats paper.
I seem to recall seeing this.
I remember when Primus was like 10, she saw that photo and I asked her if she knew who they were, and she correctly identified Churchill.
Oh,
It was a proud moment.
I'm
I
so
remember
proud of
that.
that little girl.
It was great. Okay, anyways, so what else can you tell me about Churchill?
Most of what I could tell you about Churchill is going to be from his time in the war.
Okay.
I know I've read some other stuff about him, but I'm going to be in danger of wildly telling off-base stories where I'm getting him mixed up with other characters.
Yeah.
So
Okay, well,
I seem to recall that
then
he
pause.
was. Oh, okay.
Before you do that, I have to put a plug in for Horrible Histories. Yes, I know history isn't horrible, but sometimes it is, and it's a great name for a
History
show.
isn't horrible, no.
Okay,
Not
so I
sometimes.
suggest that people watch Horrible Histories. Again, the BBC sketch comedy one, not the American cartoon, because that's garbage. But Horrible Histories from the BBC, I think it's season 6, 5. I really should
You're
know.
looking at me as if I should know the
It's
answer.
It's one of the later seasons. It was when they brought in new cast members. Anyways, there's a particular sketch.
Is that show still running, or are they done?
I don't know, because I think we're one season. Like, there's at least one season that has been aired in the UK that hasn't been available to us on Prime.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know how many we're behind. Anyways, so there's this one sketch, and it's historical homes or something is the name of the sketch, something like that. Anyways, it's about Churchill and all the remodeling he wanted to do on his house, and he had like all these grand plans, and his wife is like, what are you thinking? Like, this is way out of budget. And she's like freaking out. It's funny. It's funny. And the quote host of the show, because he's like on a historical homes show, because of course you need a premise to talk about his remodeling. The host of the show has glasses on his head and like on his shirt, and every time the scene changes, his glasses are different. He's got like 2 pair in his hands and 1 on his face, and it's funny. I don't know how to explain how funny it is. It's just funny. You have to watch it.
And yet somehow I don't think I do.
They play Churchill as this beautiful bumbling man. Like, he's so ridiculous. But powerful and arrogant.
That could be a bit mean. Like, nothing what you said is convincing me that this is the case, but they might be teasing him because he did have that impression on people.
Okay.
Amongst the reasons was he was a stutterer.
He was?
Yeah, he was a stutterer.
Oh.
That was one of the things that I think gave people a negative / harmless opinion of him during probably a significant portion of his life.
I would imagine that would impact him. Huh. Okay. I'm done rambling.
And yeah, he was. I know that he was notorious for being feisty with his secretaries or his staff. Like he would yell at them and berate them. And I think in his version of it, in his mind, he was never rude to them. He just expected. He expected perfection or near to it.
Yeah. Well, and wasn't he the one who like, worked like these crazy long hours too, and like he would be doing work from his bed and expecting secretaries and stuff and meetings while he's napping.
I believe
like,
it. I believe
he never
at his
slept.
home, he had a bed in his office at his home.
Yes, that was it. Like he just never sleeps, and he's like always working. He expects everyone else to always be working too.
And I've always been curious about this story that I heard. So I've never done an investigation to find out if this was real or not. But supposedly at some point during the war years, and I have no idea if this was because Churchill was overworking himself or if FDR was just being impertinent or trying to be Churchill to Churchill, supposedly interrupted him while he was taking a bath or a shower or something like that, and they conducted their business meeting about something they were going to do for the war while he was still stark naked and dripping.
I've heard that.
Okay.
I just hit the table and I yell at you for hitting the table.
I've
heard that.
For hitting the table. But yeah, like I said, so I've heard the story, but I've never done the work to find out what the details were. I don't even remember what it was about. I want to say it had something to do with D-Day, but I have no idea for sure if that was the case.
Wow. So were him and FDR buddies?
They were buddies, at least in that they were working together. So Britain and FDR, they were the Allied leaders. Stalin in Russia...
He was our ally too.
So, well, this is one of the things that history sometimes tells differently depending on your sources. So, when we think of the war as a whole, we tend to say Axis versus Allies. Right. So, it was Japan, Germany, and Italy versus the United States, Great Britain, and Russia. Yeah. And sometimes people will throw France into there as well. And sometimes people will even throw China into there as well.
I've played the board game. I don't think France and China are in there.
France and China are not in that board game,
okay.
No. But so despite the fact that, yes, we typically think of Russia, or rather the USSR, the United States, and Britain as the allies, there wasn't a lot of cooperation from the Soviet end. So the Soviet Union got a lot of aid, materials, money, supplies, and things of that nature from the Allies, particularly from the United States. But there was like almost no real coordination between them.
We were just giving them
the
stuff
Allies
not
could
expecting?
want. Well, yeah, pretty much. So the Allies could want the Soviet Union to, hey, do this or don't do this. And Stalin would do whatever the heck he wanted to instead. And at the same time,
What?
Stalin would be yelling at Britain and France, or Britain and the United States, saying, "Hey, I need you to do this." Stalin was yelling at FDR and Churchill for years, telling them, "I need you to do what will effectively be D-Day. I need you guys to open up another front." And they're like, "Okay, we can't just willy-nilly start another front. It takes planning. It takes time."
Yeah.
And so that might have been among the reasons for why Stalin wasn't feeling very cooperative. But Stalin was never a very cooperative kind of guy. But we're not talking about Stalin. We're talking about Churchill.
About Churchill.
So, okay, well...
Is he cooperative?
And in that, so when Germany does invade Russia during the war, that's in the summer of 41. Yeah, the summer of 41. Britain is happy, and Churchill makes a public statement and basically says, "All right, this is good, because this means that Britain is no longer fighting this war alone. Doesn't matter how much we've said all manner of evil things about Stalin, and about the Soviet Union, and about communism.
Right.
We said all these mean things about them. But that doesn't matter anymore, because, hey, anybody who's anti-Nazis and anti-Hitler, you're a friend.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend."
But really, there was nothing they could do for each other.
But then what was the point?
The only thing they could do for each other really was separating Nazi Germany's attention, so that Germany had to divide its military resources in two different directions instead of flat out one way or the other. But otherwise, they just didn't have the ability to support each other. The Soviet Union did not have the naval resources to send anything to Britain to help Britain survive. Britain's naval resources were stretched thin enough protecting their own island, and they were holding on to materials trying to build up their own war effort because they were under constant attack from the Luftwaffe, amongst other things.
Wait, what?
That's the German Air Force. So they didn't have the manpower or the supplies to say, "Oh, hey, we can go without these things that we need to defend ourselves. Let's give them to Russia." The United States was the ones that basically gave Russia and Britain almost everything it used to fight the war.
So we beat Hitler. And Churchill's taking credit for it, but he couldn't have done it without us.
That is fair, yes.
Churchill.
So, well, okay. What I think is more than likely to have happened was if the United States had not entered the war, it is probably likely that Germany still would have lost. Okay. Russia would have defeated them, and Russia probably would have done it almost virtually by themselves. Because I don't see Britain, without the United States' help, I don't see Britain in the position to have launched a successful invasion and pushed the Nazis back without the Russians doing the vast majority of the work.
But then that would have been bad, because then Russia would go on and conquer the rest of Europe?
Yes, that would have been arguably bad, because it's very likely that Russia, after having done everything, wouldn't have said, "Okay, I'll give all this nationality back to all these nations.
Yeah, no.
We'll go back to the USSR." No, I mean, as it was, he kept control, at least behind the scenes, if not in direct name, of all the territories east of Germany that his soldiers had occupied.
Right, and they would have gotten greedy and wanted more.
Yeah.
Dude, good thing we got in on the war, apparently.
Some people would say yes. I am among those that agree. Yes, I think it would, without a doubt, it would have at least been more destructive and more people would have died if the U.S. hadn't gotten involved.
Interesting way to look at it.
So we were talking about Churchill, though,
Churchill.
Right?
Him and FDR were buddies. After the war, they went out and watched a movie together and went to coffee together and best friends.
No.
Got matching those necklaces.
Do you know why the answer to your question is no?
They got those necklaces.
Do you
That's
know
a
why
heart.
the answer to your question is no?
It's a heart necklace, and it breaks, and it says best friends.
Do you know why the answer to your question is no?
I have no idea.
FDR didn't survive the war.
Wait.
FDR died before the war was over.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, I knew that. Truman.
Yes.
Okay,
Truman
I knew that.
At the end of the war.
I knew that. So did Truman and FDR and what's his face? Churchill get along?
Don't know if they got along. They definitely had to work together for at least a time. But then in the post-war years, Churchill wasn't the prime minister anymore. Truman had to work with whoever the other guy was, whose name I'm forgetting now.
Did they have to work together because Stalin didn't work together with them?
They had to work together, yes, because if they were not together, then Stalin could easily overpower one or the other.
But he was supposed to be an ally.
I feel like you ignored everything that I just said about Stalin and the relationship between Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union during the war.
I did. That's just who I am.
Sorry. Okay, so going back to Churchill. I think Churchill was the right guy for the job, especially during the war years. First and foremost, because he said at the very beginning, no, we are not giving up. Doesn't matter how bad it gets. Doesn't matter how awful it is. Doesn't matter how close to defeat or how imminent defeat appears to be. We are not going to surrender. There were lots of other people who could have had the job that were more inclined to surrender or give up or to at least seek some kind of ceasefire agreement. Because Britain, after France fell, Germany actually offered Britain a ceasefire deal. Hitler told Britain, hey, I don't want to deal with you guys. As long as you stay out of Europe, stay out of the mainland, then you guys can keep your empire. We're not going to invade you. We're not going to threaten you. Hands off. We're going to leave you alone. And
that would have been bad, though.
And Churchill said, heck no, we're not doing that.
Oh, did he get pushback from his country? Because, like, his countrymen...
Not a significant enough portion of his country, but yeah, there was pushback. There were calls to end the war constantly. And in every conflict, there's always been, like, even if the majority says pro-war, there's always been a minority that has at least said that, oh, no, we should seek peace, no matter what it costs us.
Well, yeah, and that sounds really good in the short term, but in the long term, that would have been bad, because Hitler needed to be defeated, right? Okay. So how aware of the Holocaust and all those atrocities was Britain and Churchill? Was that part of his motivation?
Historians still theorize that he probably knew more than he let on and at earlier points in time than he did. But the only like rock hard facts that we know, at least in my study on the matter, is that there was no hard evidence for what was going on. There's no guarantee that either the United States or Britain knew what was going on until the Russians started liberating some of these camps. I don't remember the name of the first one that the Russians came across, but as the Russians are pushing the Germans back into Europe and then eventually all the way back into Germany, they come across their first camp. And I really wish I could remember.
It's not Auschwitz.
No, Auschwitz
That's the
was
most
not the
famous
first camp.
one.
I don't remember what the first camp was.
Should I look it up? Is this important?
It might have been Majdanek, but I'm not positive. I don't think it's terribly important what one they found. But anyway, they were the first ones to find one of these camps. And they saw just the inhumanity that the Nazis were practicing on these people. And it wasn't just Jews. A lot of the people at this camp were Russians, or at least formerly Russian citizens, soldiers, because as much as the Germans hated Jews, they hated communists too. I dare say they hated communists more, but I can't say that for sure.
Yeah, well, they were awful too.
If there was anybody that could have contended for having equal to or more hatred by the Nazis than Jews, it would have been the communists. I'll say it like that. Okay. And when they found this camp, they told I don't know if they told directly Britain and the U.S. about it, or they just
spread the word. They called up Churchill and they called up Truman and they said, "Yo, I got some good news for you."
However they did it, they spread the information they got of this place that they found and what the Nazis were doing. And at first, the United States and Britain and other parts of the world didn't believe them. They thought that there's no way that the Nazis could be this bad. This is Russian propaganda to try to get us to try to incentivize us more to do more. And this is actually a common problem that has existed probably throughout history and continues, I think, to exist today. The unwillingness, if not the inability of people to recognize that there are evil people out there who do evil things and will spend a vast amount of resources and time to continue to do these evil things. People, like, especially in Western culture, I think, we just don't want to admit that such people could exist. I oftentimes bring up Hitler in this regard because some of my favorite things that I read about Hitler, even before the war year started, were just how many people in the United States, in Britain, in France even, who said to themselves or who said to the press, who wrote down in their own journals or their own letters at the time that, Hitler's a reasonable guy. All we got to do is sit down with him, have a conversation with him, explain to him why what he's doing is not cool, and he'll be fine. Because he's a reasonable guy. I mean, he's an educated man. He's a Western, a civilized man. And Hitler the entire time is thinking, these guys are fools. I can just keep doing what they think I'm going to do, and they're just going to keep letting me get away with it.
Wow.
Churchill's predecessor, Neville Chamberlain.
Okay.
He's the guy that goes to Munich after Hitler says that he wants us. So by this point, Hitler has violated the Treaty of Versailles on many occasions. This is before the war started. So he's occupied the Rhineland, which he's not allowed to do. He's
Orange Rhines?
No.
Okay.
He's occupied Austria, which again he's not supposed to do, and now he's looking at a chunk out of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland, which he's also not supposed to do. And so this time there's a meeting in Munich. Britain shows up, France shows up, Italy shows up to moderate. Mussolini's going to be the fair moderator.
Wait, Italy's a bad guy.
Italy is Hitler's friend at this time. Yes.
Okay, yeah, got it.
So yes, Italy shows up to moderate. Germany, of course, shows up. Czechoslovakia is not invited, even though this is concerning them.
Suspicious.
And Chamberlain forces Hitler to sign a document that says, "All right, we're going to let you have the Sudetenland if you promise to not do any more bad things." And it says, sure, I agree. Signs the document. Chamberlain flies home that day and holding the document. There's pictures and video of him doing this. Says that, I am holding the piece of paper that guarantees peace in our time. Not even a year went by before Hitler took the whole of Czechoslovakia.
Did Chamberlain believe that? Was he an idiot, or was he just looking for good PR for himself? I think
so. I think that he was. I think both are true. I think he was looking for PR for himself, and I think he was that big of an idiot. Wow. So I wrote a paper on this this phenomenon when I was still at college, and I called it the naivete of enlightenment. Enlightened people, on a large part, I think, tend to believe that everybody else out there also seeks what we call enlightenment. There's nobody out there that really wants to do these bad, unfortunate, underhanded, immoral things. And that's foolish. That's naive. Because I'd say it like this. There's what's the population of the world today? What, 7 billion?
No idea.
All right, I think there's about 7 billion people in the world. Even if we assume that 99.99% of those people are good, wholesome, honest, never going to do a bad thing in their life, wouldn't step on wouldn't harm anybody, anything in their lifetime people, that still leaves over 7 million people out there who are perfectly capable of shooting you and laughing about it. And then going off and shooting somebody else and laughing about that.
Right. Like sociopaths do exist. Psychopaths do exist.
Yes, and what's the word I'm looking for? Sadists exist. And there's always going to be that type of person out there. And it is the naivete of enlightenment, I think, that allows these people to get away with it for so long. So one could say scary. That, okay, if France and Britain had bucked up a little bit in the 30s, as early as 36 at least, they could have stopped Hitler from doing anything. They would have. I don't know if Hitler would have backed down necessarily, but at least from the very first aggressive thing that he did, they could have shown that, okay, we are going to take this to war if you keep this up. At the minimum, that would have forced him to reconsider his plans instead of emboldening him every time.
Right, but we also can't jump into every minor conflict as if it is World War III. Like, we have to pick our hills that we're willing to die on, and we can't predict what the consequences are going to be if we're loose on this one. Because if we come out too aggressive, that can cause problems too.
That's entirely true. Yeah, it's not an easy thing.
No, we have so much hindsight that we're able to say they should have done this, they should have done that. You're not being fair. You're not being fair to these historical people, honey.
How am I not being fair to them?
I don't know. You said they should have done something.
I said, no, I don't think, okay, perhaps I was wrong. Okay, so by the rules of the treaty, Britain and France should have done what I just described.
Yeah.
I understand them not doing it because, well, for one thing, the British people and the French people, even if the governments wanted to do something about it, the popular opinion was, no, just let Hitler get away with this stuff because we are not in the mood for another war. France especially. France lost a huge percentage of their population during the war. They were not prepared. Yes, during World War I. They were not prepared for another engagement like that, and they were understandably afraid of starting up something like that again.
Well, and how much time had passed between 1 and 2?
So World War I ends 1918. World War II begins, depending on who you ask. The most common thing that Westerners learn is that World War II begins 1939, so 20 years.
Oh, only 20 years.
Yep. So a generation has passed at best.
Yeah,
all the kids that grew up during World War I are the soldiers fighting during World War II.
Well, yeah, that's not enough time to recover your population if you're France. Dang.
So anyway, going back to Churchill.
Sorry, Churchill. The British dude.
I think he was the right leader for the time. I think he did a very good job at keeping up spirits. He did do several underhanded things during the course of the war, but it's understandable because he was fighting against a superior enemy, and the fact that the German. The fact the Germans had more people, they had more industrial power, they had more resources on the ground per se, and Britain was entirely dependent on its colonies and
That's why
traded to
they
provide with
needed
other resources.
us.
That's one of the reasons why
Yeah.
Britain needed us. Yes. So, but yeah, I think he was the right person for the job. He kept the nation together. He was able to keep Britain in the fight, no matter how bad it got. If I remember correctly, I think the worst day there was the Battle of Britain is what's often the name given to the Luftwaffe campaign, the air campaign. So before Germany could launch any kind of invasion of Britain, the first thing it needed to do was secure the skies over Britain. So that meant lots and lots of aircraft attacks. The goals were to destroy British military targets, destroy British industry targets, and to destroy radar towers and even some of the naval ports so that the British would not be able to defend against a naval incursion. The Germans were never able to get it. The British had a very, very effective system for finding out where the Luftwaffe was. They had not only good radar, but they had spotters out who would be able to call in and say, okay, I see this many planes, they're headed in this direction. Britain's anti-air system or air defense system had very, very good coordination, better than anything that the Nazis could throw at them.
Pause.
And
did this campaign, did this include what I've heard called the Blitz?
yes, this was the Blitz.
This is the, okay, so, okay, I know.
Or rather, the Blitz is part of the Battle of Britain, yeah.
Okay, so I know about the Blitz because of Call of Midwife. Continue.
All right. And so despite that they had all this great warning system, so they knew exactly where the Nazis were, how many there were, and whatnot, Britain still had less planes and fewer pilots. And they were losing both too fast to keep up. On one particular day, I remember when Churchill, because he writes this down in his book, when he's at, I don't remember what they call it, Allied Air Command or British Air Command, or RAF Air Command probably, while he's there, as they're like sending out their pilots desperately wherever they can go, sometimes the planes are literally being patched up on the runway and the pilot has to get right back up into the air.
That's so scary.
Because they're so desperate, yeah. At one point at its height, like he turns to one of the commanders and he said, all right, what other reserves have we got? Because they just sent another group into battle.
Yeah.
And the guy looks at him and says, there are none.
That's literally
every
it.
plane, every pilot we have is in the air right now.
That's it.
But Britain got lucky in this particular occasion because it was at about the point that the British Air Force was probably at its closest to folding. That for whatever his reasons, commander of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, he decided that this isn't being very successful enough. So let's stop bombing their airfields and switch our targets to something else.
No way.
So, like, if he had gone, like, one could argue, I don't know that I've ever read anybody do an estimate or, like, a study to come up with what the number might be.
Yeah.
But it's entirely possible that had Göring just kept up the attack even one more day, then the Royal Air Force would have had to have folded.
Did he get bad intelligence? Did he not know that Britain was, like, on their like last legs there?
So as far as the bad intelligence, yes, Britain had a superior intelligence network throughout the whole of the war. They were reading the German communications long before the Germans realized it. In fact, the Germans go to the end of the war not realizing just how well their codes had been cracked. But yeah, so British intelligence was superior.
Dang.
And in the case of why did Göring make that decision, I don't know. There were a lot of complaints that got back to Göring about the campaign. So the Nazi pilots were, some of their complaints were, okay, first off, the British had better planes than them. Yeah, the Bf-109s were faster than the British Spitfires were, but by the time the Luftwaffe got over there, they had about like 40 minutes of flight time fuel before they'd have to turn around and go home.
Whoa. Whereas
the British, they literally just got off the ground, so they could turn around, get their fuel back, and then go right back into the air.
Okay, but Europe isn't that big. Like, how much gas were they really using?
It's a long flight, especially with the planes of that time. Yeah, it's
Europe
a long flight.
Europe is like the size of an apple. It's so small. Europe is tiny. I mean, when I look on maps, it's tiny.
Really? Give me strength. Europe is not tiny, like the size of an apple.
You can drive through multiple countries in one day. Whereas here, you could start in Southern California and drive in one day, and like you'd be in Arizona. That's it. Or yeah.
You could also drive in one day and be in Washington.
No,
If
no.
you were
Better
in
example.
Rhode Island, you could drive in
Better
one day
example.
and be all the way until
No, 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 no,
Ohio
no.
or maybe even Minnesota.
Better example. You start at the bottom southern tip of Texas and drive directly north. You'd be driving for a couple days before you're out of Texas. Yep.
No.
Yep.
Texas is
Yep.
not that big.
It's pretty dang big.
It's not that big.
You could fit all of Europe inside of Texas.
No.
Yes, you
Europe,
could.
all
Yes,
of
you
Europe
could.
is about the size of the whole of the United States. Not counting Alaska and Hawaii.
It seems a lot smaller than that.
You're really killing me here, Smalls.
I'm sorry.
I hope our audience is laughing. No, actually, I hope they're not. I hope they're with me and thinking, oh, that poor man.
I'm so sorry.
Are you, though?
Anyways, Germany, they had to fly. They ran out
So,
of fuel.
yes, their airplanes were lower on fuel at the time.
Even
so
though
they
their
didn't have
planes were
that
better.
Much, they didn't have that much fighting time. So I shouldn't say that their planes were the British had the Hurricane and the Spitfire, which were good planes, but they didn't have as many of them as they would have liked at the beginning parts of the war.
Right.
But anyway, yes, among the problems also that Germany had that Britain had an advantage of was that whenever the radar towers were hit, because the radar towers were targeted, they were very easy to replace. The British could get them up and running again within an hour.
Oh.
Yeah.
But like the idea is if you keep hitting it over and over and over again, they might run out of supplies to fix.
That is a possibility, but I don't think that was the big thing on there.
Oh.
So yes, there was that, and then we were talking about the complaints that German pilots were making. So yeah, they were complaining about how little time they have to actually do any fighting while they're over there, and then there was also the problem that they kept reporting back that these guys always know where we are. They're always there. How do they know where we are all the time? So they didn't realize how
because Germans had awesome.
Germans had radar too, but the German radar were not as effective, were more primitive than the British radar. Both sides are going to improve their radar before the end of the war, but British radar was, I think, reliably throughout the whole of the war better than anything the Germans had.
Cool.
And and Churchill also had Ultra, which I really loved. So you know how there's secret and then there's top secret. Churchill had Ultra. Ultra was where the ultra secret, beyond top secret stuff was done.
How creative.
This was where they had programs where they broke the Enigma code. This was where they had programs that led to some of the great deceptions of the war. Things like Operation Mincemeat. Things like what was that other one? Like Operation Window, or Window might not have come out of Ultra.
Window?
Okay. Window was a program that this was really cool. Window was a radar jamming program that the Allies came up with, or at least the British came up with, where to jam a radar, they'd have one plane fly ahead, and it would dump little foil bits. So, like, imagine taking a bunch of
confetti,
a bunch of soda cans, cutting them up into little strips, and then just dropping them out the back. They fall, they flutter, they spread out, and it jams the radar because the radar signals are bouncing off of all these thousands and thousands of aluminum bits.
Oh, that's really clever.
Yeah. But by the end of the war, I believe the Germans fixed that too, so their radar weren't falling for that anymore.
Wow.
And then Churchill did his best to keep up the war effort. So like, they tried as best they could to keep a blockade of Germany. They did attempt on a couple of different occasions to launch mainland operations to test the efficacy of an invasion. And they found out on both occasions that, all right, this is not pragmatic. We do not have the manpower or the resources to invade the mainland and hold out.
Dang.
And this was something fun that I thought was funny about it too. So there were two attempts that Churchill ordered to invade the mainland. One was a small operation, just a handful of commandos in Norway. They got there, they encountered almost no resistance, so they destroyed a fish oil factory because it's an oil resource, just to cause some trouble. And apparently one of the soldiers that was there in that operation even went to the local telegraph office and sent a telegram to Berlin addressed to A. Hitler saying, dude, I thought you said that no matter where we land in the continent, your forces will be there. What? Where are they?
What?
And then the second time, I don't remember where it was, but the second time they attacked one of the ports. I believe it was a French port because France was occupied at this point in the war. It was a disaster. The invasion did not go well. They suffered heavy losses and heavy casualties, so they pulled back. So after that incident, Churchill says that, all right, we've learned two things. First off, we do not have the manpower, the resources to launch a successful invasion.
Mm-hmm.
Thing two, we've learned, if we are going to invade them, do not attack a port. The ports are just too heavily defended and fortified.
Okay.
Funnily enough, the lesson the Germans would take was that, if they attack, if they come again, we can see now they're going to do it at a port.
No way.
One of the many reasons for why Normandy was not an expected target.
That's awesome.
Because the Germans were convinced, or at least a fair number of the Germans were convinced for a long time that, no, when they hit us, they're going to go after a port. They're not going to go after a beach.
Stupid Nazis.
It's one of those things where it depends on how you look at it. Mm-hmm. So, same battle, both sides observed the same outcome, yet both sides drew completely different conclusions about what the next engagement would be like.
Wow.
Often enough, that's what war is. It's not that, the British were smarter than the Germans. Mm-hmm. It's that their strategies just didn't go together.
Wow. That's amazing. All right, we've been talking for about 45 minutes now.
And I don't think we've talked all that much about Churchill versus just other things that happened.
That's fine, though. The most defining thing about his
Well,
rule is World War II, right? That's what we talked about.
All right, well, let me talk about at least one of the more nefarious things. So Churchill...
Why are you trying to ruin this hero?
Churchill was a co-author of the Nadi document. The Nadi document was an agreement that he had with Stalin.
We talked about this.
I think we did. When we talked that about he Stalin. Kept in private. He purposefully did not tell the U.S. that he was doing this thing because he knew that the U.S. wasn't going to approve of this. That this was old world imperialism. You two deciding how you're going to divide the spoils of Europe after the war is over.
And it was literally on a napkin, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was literally on a napkin.
That's so shady.
So yeah, he co-sponsored or co-authored the Nadi document with Stalin, and so he was shady for doing this thing, especially because he kept it secret from the U.S. He knew that it was wrong what he was doing, but in his mind's eye, this was the only way that he'd get kind of a favorable deal with Stalin. Yeah, and I also wonder if this was just him taking a gamble, because I'm thinking he had to have known that Stalin was signing this document to appease him, and Stalin more than likely was just going to adopt the winner takes all attitude. Right. So, okay, sure, fine, yeah, we're going to agree that we're going to cut this off evenly between the spoils, but in the end, if it's my guys who are occupying Germany and your guys are still stuck on your island, I'm taking the whole thing. I'm not going to honor a deal I wrote on a napkin.
Exactly. That's messed up. Messed up, yo. All right, well, I'm going to cut you off there.
Okay.
I'm sure. Yes.
Because you can't think of any more ways to insult my intelligence or to mock my love of history.
If you give me a minute, I could think of something.
An apple because you saw it on a map. Little. Yeah, and Greenland is the largest continent. If you look at any flat world map, you'll see that Greenland is like the size of North America, all by itself.
Yeah, it's big.
And Antarctica is a never-ending skinny continent, the South Pole.
It's so long, east to west. All right, we're ending there. I'm sure we'll talk more about World War II very soon, because there's a lot to talk about.
I would say we shouldn't talk about World War II. You should pick a more finite thing on World War II.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. No, there's so many little things that we could talk about in World War II. Yeah. So I'm sure it'll come up again very soon. So we're ending there.
Okay. Good, because I think I'm getting kind of hoarse.
You don't look like a horse to me.
Yeah, but I'm looking at a horse's...
How dare you?
Rider.
You're the worst.
What? Pretty women ride horses all the time.
You are the worst.
Pretty women ride horses all the time. You're a pretty woman. I think you would look prettier if you were riding a horse.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, then please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a 5-star review. You're ridiculous.
If you'd like to hear a future episode with more information about today's topic, contact us on Gmail, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Married to History Pod.
Also, please contact us if you have a silly question idea, or if there's something from history that you would love to learn about.
Just be sure to specify in your message if it's silly or serious, because I don't want to give myself a facepalm if you're just trying to make fun of me.
Talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye. Seriously, so much of what I know comes from MASH. I'll be honest, I never studied anything. I just watched a lot of MASH. Everything I know about history I got off of MASH.
That is quite the revelation.
Mm-hmm. See, that's why I don't know anything past the 50s, because MASH only took place in the 50s.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
It does, doesn't it?